Would you pass a memory loss test? What is a memory loss test? You could probably all think about those pen and paper tests, but what I'm talking about is how do we detect our risks for memory loss and also help us make changes in our lives? And how can box thinking get us into trouble when we're wanting to do a memory loss checkup? I'd like to flip it on its head and say memory health checkup instead. And what can Meryl Streep, Alex Baldwin and Steve Martin teach us about it as well? All this plus more in today's Memory Health Made Easy podcast, episode 18. This show is for people that are questioning what can they be doing to reduce their risk and wanting a personalised view on where they stand and what they can do about it. If this is your situation, then I'd thoroughly recommend joining me today on today's podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Memory Health Checkup, a program I've put together to help crystal clear on where they stand and also what they can do about their risk for memory loss. You can find more about the Memory Health Checkup at memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products, where you'll see a lot of our resources in our Memory Health Academy. If you haven't done so already, I'd strongly encourage you to subscribe to our show. It's one way we can stay in touch and you'll be notified when a new episode is released each week. If you've enjoyed the content so far and you haven't done it, we'd love a 5-star review if you think it's worthy. The vision I have is to create a movement of people who are taking positive steps to improve their memory health, to boost their brain fitness for life. If you want to be part of that journey, then I need your help. I need your help to reach more and serve more folk. One way we can do that is, if you've listened to the show before, is to take a screenshot or maybe just jot down a few things that you've enjoyed about today's conversation or previous episodes, and then share it with other folk about what you're learning. Not only are you helping yourself by reinforcing what you've learned, but you're also introducing to other people's lives some information that can help move the dial on their own personal risk factors for memory loss. It is one simple thing that we can do to help reach more, create more memory health. If you've not heard me say it before, I am super grateful for your precious time, your listening ears, and your motivation to be here. Thank you. My name is David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, and let's get into today's show. G'day, this is David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, brought to you by memoryhealthmadeeasy.com. Easy to remember, isn't it? Imagine this. A 49-year-old man at work. It's an average day. Comes, goes, like many of them have before it. But today, in response to a perceived slight from a co-worker, he's thrown the stapler across the room only to smash it against the wall. Yeah, this is out of character for this guy. 3 months later, he's driving his children to school. He is in a fit of rage in response to a cyclist passing him, whereby he smashes the driver's side window screen. 6 months later, his risk-taking behaviour has really gotten out of control. He's betting on the horses and anything he can put a bet on, as well as drinking to excess. And this is certainly out of character of where he was 6 months ago. 12 months later, whilst his wife was away for a much-needed break with the children, he absconds, leaving the home with all its possessions packed up, as well as fleecing the accounts and moving to live with his partner of the last 6 months. My question here is, A, is he just a really nasty guy? B, has there been a traumatic event which has really influenced his behaviour? C, has he got a brain tumour? D, has a genetic switch been triggered or an epigenetic buildup that's been occurring for the last decades now starting to manifest over the last 12 months? E, has he got a parasitic infection? Has he been eating the standard Australian or a standard American diet for far too long, and a whole host of associated changes affecting his hormones, his blood supply, his sugar regulation have all now tipped him over the edge? And I forget which number we're up to now, but is he suffering from an extreme midlife crisis in response to some childhood experience? Ask a psychiatrist what's going on with this gentleman, and the answer might be, well, it could be to do with the neurochemicals that are associated with his behaviour. Perhaps there's a personality trait disorder that is now starting to manifest, or there is a certain event that's triggered a mental health episode. Asking the gentleman's GP, they might say, well, we need to have a look at the infection issues potentially here, screen out any mental health concerns, and potentially have a look under the hood and see what's going on with their bloods. Depending on what they find, might actually trigger a referral to a specialist. Let's say it's a neurologist. Please review for further complications associated with behaviour. Would be something along the lines of the letter sent to the neurologist. And in that, the neurologist would probably have a look at a variety of different things, but the process is one of exclusion, ruling out rather than ruling in. Is it not that? Is it not this? And coming to a neighbourhood of symptoms that represent a cluster or a specific diagnosis. Ask an endocrinologist what's going on, and they're going to have a look at the hormone functions and seeing which one's out of whack. Ask a neurosurgeon, and they're going to investigate what are the likelihoods of trauma that's occurred with this person's brain and run that under a few scans. Ask a psychotherapist. I think you're going to get my point here. The point is that we are going to investigate this gentleman's scenario from various different lenses, depend on our view, our category, our box, our frame of reference. Let me ask you this. If you're going to the gym and you start moving your body and physically applying yourself, and you're lifting weights, you're raising your heart rate, you're applying a stress to your body in a way physically that you're going to start to feel a little bit better. Your mood improves, your sense of world outlook is improving, you're feeling a little bit more alert. Or how about this? You're lying in bed at night, it's dark, and you hear a noise at the back door, and you think, there is somebody at the back door. The heart starts to race. You start to sweat profusely, and your thoughts are racing around who is there, and there is likely an intruder, and I might need to call the police. These two examples really reinforce the view that the body can influence the performance of the brain, and as well as the brain can influence the performance of the body. Which one is correct? Is it the chicken or the egg? Which comes first? How do they influence each other? And I guess that there is so many things happening here that it's hard to pinpoint one thing over the other, to box it down. I'd be very wealthy for all the questions I fielded about what is the one thing I can do to reduce my risk for memory loss. It appeals to our basic nature of how we cluster things, group things, chunk things down. In my assessments with folk with mild cognitive impairment, when somebody presents to my memory health clinic, I'll commonly do a few tests, and there's one very familiar test you might have heard of already to determine fitness or cognitive fitness or capacity of office, and I'm referring to the assessment used with Donald Trump called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. In it, there is a question about remembering a series of numbers. So I thought what would be kind of fun is to give you a series of numbers to remember. So here we go. Quick little test. Rapid fire. Ready? 3, 4, 8. 34, 18, 29. 307, 494, 8. 63. 759, 81. 11, 891. 89111, 891. 24, 39, 659, 4. How did you go? Well, if you're doing okay at the beginning and clustering things in fours, maybe you're from Australia because that's a familiar way of clustering numbers around our postcodes. Or if you're connecting things much like a sequence of a phone number, maybe that's a mobile or a cellular phone number, that worked well. But once that pattern, that chunking, that clustering, that grouping broke down, then it became much more difficult. And we are catching up, or it's starting to flow into I can't recall, and we are disconnected from a familiar context or a familiar strategy and putting it together. I'll give you another one. 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, 33. What's the next number? If you said 35, well, why? And you might say, well, Dave, it's going up in twos, is it not? Well, you're kind of correct, but you're not. In fact, the last number is actually 33. That's because that's the last number of my street. Again, context here, and I know it's a little bit of cheeky of me and a bit of tongue-in-cheek, so to speak, as I do this, but what I'm trying to suggest is that sometimes when we're looking at things, we will base it on familiarity, context, environment, and a whole host of other variables which will drive the answer. And I guess this is sometimes the fault of thinking things in boxes. Our memory health and all the things associated with it is starting to represent this particular picture. If we go back to that gentleman, that 40-plus-year-old worker, and what he went through, what were the causative or associated factors? Well, there's many different lenses we could look at it. Which is the right one? Which is the way to treat it? Which is the way to respond to it? Which is the way to reduce our risk for it occurring? I think we can start to see that it requires a little bit more global or holistic understanding about the many different systems or moving parts that might be involved, not just one area. What if there was a context in the background to all of this, that there was a whole host of stresses, or that there was a post-traumatic stress experience that was starting to manifest for this man? It was one of those things that perhaps wasn't really described all that much or taken note of. We could have come up with a whole host of reasons about why he behaved a certain way. When it comes to our memory health and looking at the factors to reduce the risk for memory loss in our life, we need to be thinking about the whole system, things that can influence. And even then, we need to be very mindful that there are likely other factors that we don't understand or don't appreciate at this point in time. So where does this leave us? I guess, to borrow this next exercise, and again, I'm doing it with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, but please bear with me, and I'd love to see how you go with this one. I'm going to give you 2 names, and I want you to tell me the third name. Here we go. Steve, Alex. What is the third name? I'm going to give you a little bit more information in a different order, but I'll give you 2 names and see if we can figure it out. Merrill and Alex. Bit more information. Baldwin, Martin. A little bit more information. Martin Streep. I guess if you've seen the movie involving Meryl Streep, Alex Baldwin, and Steve Martin, you'd know that movie it's complicated and something's got to give. Yes, it is pretty complicated when it comes to our memory health, and that probably puts our head in the sand about what we can do to take control. And that's why we will commonly default to asking the question about what is the one thing I could do to reduce my risk? Well, there isn't just one thing. There are many factors that we need to be mindful of. We could perhaps describe the experience of memory loss and severe memory loss for conditions like dementia as early onset dementia or late onset dementia, which is commonly associated with senile dementia or dementia of an aged population. And when we're looking at some of those risk factors for late onset dementia specifically, there's been a whole host of things that have been associated with increasing one's risk. Importantly, these are vascular risk factors or blood supply risk factors. These observations have led to the catch-cry phrase that you would have heard quite frequently, which is, what's good for the heart is good for the, yep, you got it, the brain. In regards to genetic associations for dementia, the most popular or most widely published studies associating genetic risk with late onset dementia has been for the apolipoprotein E gene and the chromosome 17. So we would commonly call that the APOE gene. The APOE gene has been known since 1999. There are 3 polymorphic forms of APOE, namely APOE2, APOE3, and APOE4. That's easy for me to say. The APOE4 variation is putting somebody at greater risk for likely developing Alzheimer's type dementia, and also has been shown to occur few more years earlier than the general population who don't carry this particular genetic risk. Now, isn't that interesting? Those folk that have APOE4 are at higher risk, but other folk will also experience Alzheimer's type dementia. What has been recently called out is that we need to be a lot more specific in looking at the sub-profiling or the profiling of the various types of dementia, as I've mentioned in episode 1 and 2, looking at those due to what type scenarios. Now, interestingly, despite being and carrying this particular genetic variation of APOE4, people can still make decisions around their lifestyle choices, those environmental outside body factors that can influence the inside mechanisms at a cellular level, at a DNA level. By taking on and choosing to do lifestyle choices that are associated with reducing their risk for Alzheimer's type dementia, they are also putting themselves at a better position. So, as I've mentioned before, it is genes that load the gun, but it is our environmental exposures, the things that we choose to do or are in contact with, that can pull the trigger. Wow, a lot of stuff in this episode. Be right back into it. I want to share with you a little bit about memoryhealthmadeeasy.com and what you can find over there. Programs, resources, and community, all with one goal: to help stop avoidable memory loss. Here's a great place to start. The Memory Health Checkup shows you how to identify your personal risks and also set a map and course about what to do about them. The Memory Health Fast Masterclass gets you out of the gates quickly around applying the 9 principles for memory health for life. Want to work out your brain? Improve your brain performance with How to Train Your Brain. It's a 30-day brain optimizing program. And of course, we've got our flagship community, which is all about support, and you can ask me any question, where I'm your memory health coach to guide, support, and cheer you through the steps to achieve memory health. Come on over to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products where you can find out more. Now let's get back to today's episode. Interesting thing about APOE4 is that it has been shown to be cross-talking with the amyloid beta, and it's been implicated in a number of processes that have been shown to impact our lipid metabolism and inflammation, so much so that it's been observed to have a beneficial expression, particularly when we're younger. However, it comes back to bite us in the backside, so to speak, as we're older. There is some suggestion too that APOE4 can compromise the blood-brain barrier. The underlying mechanisms aren't that clear. Now, I'm going to hold myself up here. You can see that we could quickly go down the rabbit hole of trying to understand the mechanistic why, putting some fences around why, and that because it is related to how to treat. What can we do right now to start to take control of our memory health destiny? Well, it comes back to looking again, stepping back, appreciating we are dealing with a very complex set of interactions, but we observe a positive association by reducing risk factors. The mechanisms, the how, the neighborhood of understanding becomes a lot harder in the absence of rich and robust data. Don't get me wrong, there is a growing body of evidence around populations, around treatment methods, around animal-based models to form our understanding. However, it's still somewhat incomplete, and we need to appreciate the complexity. So where does that leave you and I? I think appreciating what we know first and making sure that it's not getting in the way of what we don't know. As I mentioned earlier, it's often about the context and familiarity with certain situations that help inform our truth, our observation, our answer, our response. And that's why this podcast is really here, is to try and bring in the complexity, to build our observation, our high-level view, to see the relationship of how this stuff is threatening our vitality, our independence, our opportunity in life to live it on our own terms. By taking actions to reduce our risk, we're going to be in a better spot. And I think nothing more compounding or stark was the observation by Dr. Sherney in recent episodes where he referred to his own family members being stuck in the disbelief that what he was doing was working. So how do we get an aerial view of our risk? Well, it comes down to looking at your personal risk factors, and this is something that I've mentioned in earlier episodes about understanding where you stand. Understanding what your familial risks are, what are your lifestyle risks are, and getting a handle on that and actually calibrating that. Because then that motivates you and aligns you to right action to reduce your risk. It means that you then start to involve the right team to help advise what could be the best strategies for you, to help dial into a little bit more microscopically on your own specific needs and situations. So understanding the high level and relationship view about these big factors and not being stuck in a box to say it's my multivitamin or it's this. You know, it's that classic question, as I mentioned earlier, what is the best multivitamin I should be taking to reduce my risk for memory loss? And my standard answer is always eat food that is rich and nutritious and got lots of colors in it, and get advice if you need it around what might be a suitable dietary intervention for your specific needs. How often should we check our memory health? Well, I would suggest it needs to happen yearly. As I've mentioned on earlier shows, we need to be having a memory health checkup at least once a year, especially over the age of 40, once those changes are potentially starting to play out. The sooner we can get in front of the potential changes in your body, in your brain, the better. Soon as we start to identify your risk, your status, your potential threats, the sooner we can pull out the big old samurai sword and cut those risk factors down. Time is really of the essence. The further we get down this trajectory of change, the harder it is to correct. If we wait for that true symptom presentation of I can't remember where my glasses are, and in fact they're in the fridge, they're in the fruit bowl at the bottom of the rotting tomatoes, which I've seen before, then the horse is certainly out of the gates, and we are now facing a much, much more significant challenge about trying to put things in place to help live life still on your own terms. But the tide is changing. Let's not wait for that. Let's try and get in front of this. And by doing so is having a memory health checkup. You could have a chat with your GP and go through what are those known physical and physiological culprits that they might be able to have a look at. But you'd appreciate, if anything out of today's episode, it is understanding that a much larger radar is needed to pick up on what these risk factors are. We could look under the hood, but that's going to tell us some of those changes around our hormones, our immune system, our levels of micronutrients, etc. And that's going to help us nudge around maybe some tweaking. But what does that convert into a lifestyle? What does that convert into actions around day-to-day living? What does that mean for your genetic risk? What does that mean for your type of activities that you're doing to challenge yourself cognitively? A lot of this stuff is not answered within 15-minute consultation. We need to be scanning, as I said, much like a prospector on the beach, of pinging those things that are of value, of pinging those things that are going to move the needle in a positive direction on reducing your risk for memory loss. If this is something that is interest to you, I have the Memory Health Checkup, which is available at memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products. You can have a look at some of those tools that we've built in our Memory Health Academy to try and give you those resources, that framework, the guidance on how to do this yourself. I fundamentally believe that we need to improve our own capacity to be our own navigators for our health. If you're after a framework to go through some of these things, then perhaps the Memory Health Checkup is for you. Whether you choose to work with us or maybe you decide to do some work with somebody else, here's what I think is important to map and identify with regards to your risk for memory loss. First off, it should identify your personal lifestyle risk factors. And I want in this to have an understanding how your daily physical exercises, what you're doing to challenge your brain, sleep, other activities which are associated with either harming or helping your memory health. I want you to learn how your current diet is either adding to the fire or turning that dial right down on that gas burner, so to speak, on your risk for memory loss. It should leave you with a sense of capability and know-how and have a sense of what is the direction I need to move in from here. There's no point having the numbers or the information and not taking action with it. So it needs to give you a sense of what next. A memory health checkup should also be the burning platform for change, which is borrowing from some business psychology observations that when we create some urgency about the need to change, we are more inclined to take that action. And no doubt, casting a lens over where we are at and our risks for memory loss is going to create that burning platform for change. It is the spark to get us started. And so that's why I think it's critically important that we have a connection with what next. It should be about prevention, not so much when things are happening, when the house is burning down, so to speak. Prevention is where this is at. So it should be prevention minded. And that's the best treatment we have. And conducting this on a yearly basis should be almost something you put in the calendar. Maybe it's the 1st of May. In fact, I think I might take that. 1st of May as being the Memory Health Checkup Day. So let's think about how, if you're involving or working with your GP, you're doing something in this regard. It should cast a good light across these areas. And lastly, and it's probably the place we go to when we think about memory health, is doing a cognitive checkup, a cognitive screen, a memory health assessment. And I think it needs to be a little bit more sensitive than the one that was given to Donald Trump, the President of the United States. So the mocker is a helpful tool more so for detecting change of an overt nature in somebody's cognitive abilities. We want something a little bit more sensitive than that, something that's going to pick up where you're at against your peers. Some of the games that I've mentioned earlier in previous episodes have this inbuilt function where you just get a little bit of data about how you're performing against others. That may be sufficient, but if you want to go a little bit deeper, that's when you might need to partner with somebody, and that's something that we offer as an adjunct to our memory health checkup. Look guys, we've covered a fair bit of territory today. We've looked at how our clustering or grouping mindset, our skills and behaviors of grouping things certainly informs our behavior and performance, and we had a particular experience of that in using our memory. We had an observation of a young man who experienced cognitive changes, and we observed those changes through various different lenses of informing our truths. What we're about and what today's show has been is to really drive home and emphasize the point that it's quite a complex issue. It's complicated, to borrow Meryl Streep. It is complicated, and something's got to give. We need to look at a wholer or a broader lens around some of those factors that are influencing our cognitive risk, our risk for memory loss later in life. And these small daily changes that we can implement will reduce our risk. It's knowing where to start and having a framework that is not pigeonholing us in one thing over the other, but looking at the cluster of areas that are associated with memory loss later in life. That if we take changes now, we can reduce our risk later. I've mentioned also the Memory Health Checkup, which you can find out at Memory Health Made Easy /products, and you'll see the Memory Health Checkup listed there. If that's of interest to you and you want to explore that, come across and have a look at it. I'm David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, and I want to thank you very much for your attention today. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, hit that button, and if you've enjoyed the content, please give us a 5-star review if you think it's worthy. Another way that you can drive home some of your learnings today is to take a screenshot, post it on social media, or send it to a friend with a little bit of description about what you learnt. Through sharing and repeating what you've heard today is another way to consolidate what you've learnt, and I hope move you to a state of action about taking control of your risk factors. We'll certainly touch on this again and again, and we'll look at it through different lenses because that'll help inform our understanding of the various different factors that can influence our performance. Today's show is no doubt influenced by many folk, and if I reflect on my own personal experience of how I came to be here today, is that as an occupational therapist and also background in science before starting occupational therapy, I guess I've been fascinated by the systems that influence our cognitive performance, our ability to perform as human beings. Today's show is a combination of all the wonderful guest speakers that we've had to date, and also those that are yet to come, that I've really deep dived on some of their research, and it's also informed my practice. I'd like to tip my hat to Professor Robert Sapolsky of Stanford University, who's a biologist, a neuroendocrinologist, who's done some fascinating work in human behavior and has given me some inspiration for today's show as well. He's got a fabulous book out called Behave, and I'll put the links in below at Memory Health Made Easy, episode 18. I'm Dave Norris, and this is Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thank you very much for your attention today. And again, grab the show notes, show resources, and any of the recommendations out of today's show at memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/podcast episode 18. Thanks again. And here's to creating better memory health in you and others and your community. Talk to you soon. Bye. So there we have today's episode, closing up with what I think has been a fun exercise in exploring what a memory loss assessment should involve. And more importantly, we need to flip it on its head and think about it as a checkup. These checkups start in our 40s, 50s and 60s, and we should be doing this consistently. We should have a cognoscopy every year. That's right, every year, a cognoscopy. Know where you stand, know what your risks are, and then take immediate action against those risk factors so you can cut down your risk for memory loss. But also, be sharp for life, be sharp for now, have abundant energy to live life fiercely on your own terms. That's what this show is all about. And I'd love to put you in a position that you can start to do something about it. Have your own personalized strategy. If you've enjoyed today's show, please come across to the episode 18 and grab the show resources that we've put together especially for this. If you'd like to understand and learn more about a memory health checkup where we look at your memory loss risks, then we also talk about that a little bit more in detail over at memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products. I'm Dave Norris. Thank you very much for your special attention today, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Cheers. Bye for now. If you really enjoyed today's conversation and have enjoyed other conversations on the podcast, Memory Health Made Easy, come on over. And I'm super excited to announce, ready, drum roll. That's right, I've got a Facebook group, Memory Health Warriors. A Memory Health Warrior is somebody who wants to turn up for themselves, their family, and their community, to have abundant energy and to play life fiercely so that we can have a beautiful brain for life, for memory health for life. The tribe's mission is simple. We're going to achieve 1 million beautiful brains, healthy, gorgeous brains, so that we can have memory health for life. And it's for folk who want to go a bit deeper with the content around the stuff that we go through here on this podcast. So join me over on Facebook at Memory Health Warriors. That's right, plural. And come and see what it's all about. Until next time, I'm your host, Dave Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thanks for listening. The purpose of Memory Health Made Easy podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a doctor or qualified professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or personal professional advice or services. Instead, we would encourage you to discuss your options with a healthcare provider who specializes in your particular needs.